Well, hello again. This is the third segment of a series of videos that are for the module in the Arts and Culture of Asia that is dealing with introductory terms and an overview of the arts of Asia and sort of laying the groundwork for our course. Where were we? We had just finished looking at an example of durable art in the form of sculpture, and now we are moving into painting. Just bear with me for one moment. Okay. So here we are. So painting, what you see here behind my text is a persimmon tree from the Edo period in Japan. It is on silk, and its delicate refinement and simplicity is characteristic of this period of painting in Japan. So that's something we can look forward to together. So painting, I have a nice definition here for you. I'd like to call your attention to this usually. So painting is usually involves the application of one flexible medium, such as paint, ink, or colored plaster, onto a stable surface where it remains as a representation or visual form of some kind. However, as your assignment will invite you to really think about, it doesn't have to be a medium that remains. So one can paint with sand, and the idea of art and painting that is ephemeral is significantly more important than we tend to realize in the history of art. This is not a class on world art, but sand painting in various cultures and the way in which it can be erased is an important part of art that is not meant to endure and bears meaning of a quite different and significant sort. So I want you to be thinking about that in your assignment. That being said, let us go and look at examples of painting that is meant to endure. A kind of painting we'll see a lot in this class in China and in Japan is silk painting. Here I'm speaking about Chinese silk painting. It's when artists use ink and water-based color on paper or silk to create traditional tableaus, which means a scene, often depicting landscapes, but also floral scenes or a persimmon tree, as we saw a moment ago. The special qualities of painting in this way is one where the line is durable right away. There is no erasing, or very little erasing and removal. And part of the value in the technique itself is the control of the artist's hand and the way in which ink has its own personality in relation to absorbing onto paper or silk. And the artist's hand as gesture takes on great significance in Asian painting that is very important to consider and understand. And we'll be looking at that with great care in this class. Here I brought in an example. We'll look at this. This is one of our key images in Chinese ink painting on scroll. And this is Seeking the Tao in the Autumn Mountains. I've spoken a lot about Buddhism so far, but Taoism and Confucianism are very important in this class as well. And they inform visual art and literature significantly. And we will be taking care to examine the connection between the arts and the philosophy of Confucianism and the mystical belief system of Taoism or Taoism, the Tao. So this is from the 13th century in southern China, the Song dynasty, and we're looking, well, I ask you, what do you notice at first about this image? It's very, very simple and spare, and the emphasis is on a line of elegance and refinement. And this is a stylistic trait that we will be exploring, particularly in the Song dynasty, where an aesthetic of form takes a center stage rather than a aesthetic which is deeply bound up in a faith or in a philosophy. Although one could argue it's never, you can't ever really remove it if it's there to begin with, but the emphasis shifts, and we can see that. Lacquer painting is another technique from Asia, and lacquerware describes objects which have been covered in liquid made of shellac or melted resin flakes dissolved in alcohol, which forms a hard, protective, smooth coating when dry and remains relatively light in weight. Think of, if any of you have the experience of sap from a tree getting on you or on your clothes, it's light and it's very permanent. So this is a controlled use of that property. And lacquer is a very refined technique in China and in Asia, and may involve 10 to 100 layers of different colors or variations of hue of a color. And then the image or the depiction of the lacquer that takes shape is often by sanding away and then burnishing through layers. So it's painting a series of colors and then subtracting to pull out certain forms and then burnishing and polishing. So we'll look closely at this durable art form and its impact in Europe. It was an extremely important technique like porcelain that entered Europe and with great influence. Here we're simply looking at the Bodhisattva Padmapani in Ajanta, India, painted on a stone wall, 450 to 490. We're moving around pretty dramatically with dates. The Song dynasty, that very simple orchid that we looked at, was much later than this wall painting from India. Painting on stone, we call it wall painting or mural painting. We don't call it fresco, which is something else, but it's durable. A particularly cultivated durable art form in Asia is the art of printmaking from wood blocks, and we see this especially in Japan. What we're looking at to the left is an illustration of the technique and method of carving away negative space to leave positive space, and the interplay of these negative and positive space in wood becomes the cosmology or the composition of various levels of wood that touch paper, which is laid upon the wood after ink has been or color has been laid down, and then it's pressed. And then what emerges is a reverse of negative and positive space if it's wood block printing. Here is the outcome of this very refined art. So we would talk about the technique of printmaking, woodblock printmaking in Japan, but we would also talk about the aesthetics that we see here. We see 3 long, elegant boats with tiny figures and a repetition of curving crescent-like forms that create a kind of symphony, if you will, of repeating shapes that climax in more repeating nervous short shapes of the foam of a wave. And then the intractable stillness of Mount Fuji in the background sits in quite a strong contrast to the movement and fluidity of the waves and their relation to these boats, these form of canoe, but I'm sure there's a specific term, and by the time we get to this part of the class, I will have refreshed my memory. Now returning to India in the 17th century, we're looking here at a fairly small and refined work of art in watercolor, paint, and gold leaf. And it's a portrait of Shah Jahan on horseback. And when we study this period in India, Mughal India, we will be talking about the influence of Western or European traditions and their contact with India and the fusion that occurs and the vibrant forms that come out of that. All right, so that's the end of durable art in painting. I'm going to go on for a few more minutes, and hopefully the YouTube video will permit me to do so to finish this unit. And here we're looking at the third category of art, ephemeral art. And actually, I'm going to change my mind and I'm going to stop here. And I'm going to ask you to come back for part 4 when we talk about ephemeral art and temporal art. I don't want to rush through this because this is in many ways the counter to and the rationale for talking at such length about durability in art is so that we can really understand the difference when looking at art that is not intending to be durable and has a very different relationship to its materiality and time. All right, so I'll see you again soon. And let me stop the video.